We're continuing on with our series called Decoding Communication, which is decoding one of the greatest mysteries in the world, and that is the mystery of miscommunication that takes place between a man and a woman, between a husband and a wife in a marriage relationship. In session 1, I dealt with boys and girls, men and women, and I showed that, by the way, there are differences. And in session 2, we dealt with the secret that decodes communication between a man and a woman. Session 3, we moved on to the session that was designed for women to understand the mind of a man. It was called actually Understanding the Mind of a Man. In session 4, we talked about speaking the language of respect. Now in session 5, we're going to move on into the second part of the last session, which is called Speaking the Language of Respect. Now, some of you ladies are going to maybe tune into this presentation right here, and you're going to say, boy, this is sure a one-sided presentation. Well, I have to admit, it is. In fact, the last 2 sessions were one-sided presentations because, see, they were designed to help ladies to better understand what's happening in their husband's mind and understanding how better to communicate with their husbands by learning the language of their husband, which is the language of respect. And then in the next 3 sessions, we're going to do a flip-flop. We're going to show the other side, and we're going to be talking to the men about helping to understand the mind of a woman. And believe me, this will be fair and balanced reporting. Now, it's obvious that men and women, they speak, completely different languages. The women, they speak the romantic language, the French, the Italiano, it's the language of the romance. And the men, they speak Russian, they speak Slavic, and they speak German. I'm German, I can say that, and God created us different. We speak different languages sometimes, and sometimes there's some communication problems. People who are French have a hard time communicating sometimes with people who are German, and that just happens because there's different languages there. Not either of the languages are better than each other. Not one is more superior. It's just that they're different. And so a person who's going to speak to a French person needs to learn more French, and a person who's going to speak Slavic needs to learn more Slavic. And a wife can try to learn to speak more in a man's mother tongue. Speaking of speaking in mother tongues, I was in Romania right after the collapse of communism. I was over in the far eastern part of the country by the Ukrainian border at a place called Voronets. It's an old monastery. I was traveling with 2 Romanian boys, and very few Westerners made their way to this part of Romania. And I was among some of the first Westerners really to start traveling into Romania right after the collapse of communism. I was traveling with these 2 boys, and one of them spoke a little English. The other one didn't speak any English. I was surrounded by a sea of Romanian people that were speaking Romanian. And I was kind of missing talking to somebody in English. And all of a sudden at Voronets, I heard someone speaking English. And I ran over to this husband and this wife, and I said, you folks are speaking English. Where are you from? And they said, we're from Massachusetts. And I said, Massachusetts? Really? My name's Jeff. I'm from Idaho. And we chatted, and they were happy to see me, and I was happy to see them because I heard my mother tongue, and it drew me to them. And that's exactly what happens. Respect is the mother tongue of a male. And when a wife starts to learn to speak the mother tongue of a male, and understand the mother tongue of a male, then it'll draw her husband to her. It'll energize her husband. It'll motivate her husband. And that's what I hope to show you in dealing with this session and the session previous to this, learning to speak the language of respect. Now, you remember when you were courting, you both had that admiration for each other, that respect. You had a belief in each other. And he knew it when he was courting you. He just knew that was there. You guys did special little things for each other. And there was a glow there that took place when you were in the courtship. I was just at a church recently, and I was sitting in the sanctuary. And the sanctuary was kind of a curve shape. It was a church we were visiting, and I noticed this young couple looked like they were fairly newlywed over there, and the pastor was preaching up front, and I was just kind of watching, because I like to watch people and how they behave, and the wife kept looking up at her husband, and she just had this glow on her face, and she's just admiring her husband. And he was sitting there listening to the sermon, acting like he didn't see her. The truth was, he saw it all. He was soaking in the glow coming from his wife, just sitting there, because that's what guys do. Guys love to have their wives admire them. It's not an ego thing. It's just the way men are. Just like you want to have your husband love you and show affection to you, men like to have their wives admire them and show respect to them. And then all of a sudden, you get married. And because of possibly his immaturity, something happens and all of a sudden you get wounded, you get hurt, you find out things about his personality you didn't maybe know about when you were courting. He finds out some things about you, some offenses happen, there's some wounding going on, and that glow starts to dissipate. And as we say, the old idiom goes, the honeymoon is over. You watch a man react to the glow of his girlfriend. He loves it. And the funny thing is, he thinks it's going to be there the rest of his life. And then, poof, it's gone. Now, I'm not trying to cast blame on it's the wife's fault or the guy's fault. Things happen in a marriage relationship. The honeymoon does kind of get over. And what I'm hoping to do in this series is to be able to share with you some things that will try to bring back that glow, looking at the Bible and the Word of God, and be able to try to understand God's perspective on how a man who has got his blue sunglasses on and how a woman who's got her pink sunglasses on can come together and make that royal color of purple, the color of the Godhead, because God wanted a man and a woman to be one flesh, to represent Him in a more full and complete way that they can't separately, independent of each other. He wants that glow in our relationship because we are, in our marriage relationship, to reflect the image of God. Now, speaking of courtship and the honeymoon being over, you need to remember something about men. Men are hunters. Now, I live in North Idaho. I know all about hunting. I mean, when hunting season comes here in northern Idaho, here in good old America, and this little town looks like it's a military training base or something. You see guys with camo outfits, four-wheel drive trucks with mud all over the side. They got their campers. They got a trailer with four-wheelers. They're going to go hunting. They're men. They're going to go hunting. It's a hunting thing. Men are hunters. They say women are shoppers. Men are hunters. And there's something about a hunter he'll do. He'll go out in the pursuit. And he's pursuing the animal, and he finally shoots the animal, and they call that in hunting in America an idiom. It's called bagging the game. You'll see all these pictures in these sporting goods stores of these guys with their foot up on an elk or a deer or a bear, with their hunting rifle smiling. But something happens to a guy once he bags his game. The hunt is over. And then the man goes on to a different hunt. And unfortunately, this also creates a dilemma because not only in the marriage relationship has there maybe been some wounding that happened in the relationship and that glow starts to dissipate. But now, ladies, you might have a hard time understanding this, but I'm trying to help you understand what happens. Even guys don't understand what's going on, but this is the way God's hardwired men, and sin has contributed to this. When He's courting you, He's in pursuit, and you loved it. He was on the hunt, and He was pursuing you, and you loved it. And then you get married, and he bagged the game. And unfortunately, all of a sudden he goes on to some other new hunt because see, he's already finished his one hunt, and so now maybe he moves his attention and his energy in another direction for another hunt because as I shared with you, men are compartmentalized. They're kind of like in one room at a time. And so he bags his game, he's got his wife, and now he goes on to his job or his career. He moves on to possibly, hobbies, working on cars, maybe sports or things like that. And all of a sudden, those things have become things that he pursues. And the wife feels kind of like, wow, this is not what I thought was going to happen when we were married. And I'm, as I mentioned in our last session too, I was, tying this all together. Men being hunters. A man really instinctively, as a hunter, is hunting for one thing, and not so much today as it was in olden days, but a man hunted specifically in olden days because he would go out and bag the game because that was the way of providing for his family. So men are providers as much as they are hunters. And most men have this mistaken thought in their mind that by providing, they're showing their love for their family, and that's true, they are. But unfortunately, they can get misplaced priorities because they go out and pursue in the hunting mode being a provider, and then they start neglecting their home. It's also said that sometimes men are not happy at home, so their work becomes a way of escape. So you tie all this together, the glow starts to dissipate. There's some tension going on at home. The man's bagged the game. Been these bricks of offense that start happening, and then the man starts his pursuit of his job. And then he gets to the point where he's whistling on Monday because he's going to work, and on Friday he's not happy because he's coming home because work has become an escape from dealing with the problems he perceives that are at home. And then the wife will turn around and say something like, "Why are you always working? Why are you always gone? Why don't you spend more time with the family?" And he'll reply, "Can't you see I'm doing this for the family? I'm trying to provide so we can pay for," and he'll give a long list of things like to pay for the house, to pay for the car, to pay for the kids to go to a private school. And he thinks that, by providing for his family, that he is showing love to his family and to his wife. But that's not the way the wife reads it. Now you remember, I shared some statistics in some of the other presentations, and I just want to go to this one really quick and show you something that's really amazing. It's from the book called For Men Only, and it's written by Jeff Fieldahan. Excellent book. They gave me permission to use some of this information through this series, and you want to get the books For Men Only and For Women Only. Excellent books that are done on surveys of hundreds of men and hundreds of women that can give you a general idea of how men and women perceive different circumstances in their marriage relationship. And the question was asked, a large group of married women, if you had to choose between these two bad choices, which would you rather endure? Financial struggles, or struggles that come from insecurity or a lack of closeness in your relationship. Now look at this. 70% of the women said they would rather go through financial struggles than to go through the struggles that come from insecurity or a lack of closeness in their relationship. So here men have this idea that if they're providing for their wives and providing financial security, that's expressing love to them, and really the wife is saying, that's not what's most important to me. What's most important to me is knowing that there's security in my relationship with you. Now, not all women are like that, and also I'm not going to justify men who are not adequately supplying for the needs of their family. There are some men that are, I'll just be point blank and say it as it is, they're lazy and they don't go out and provide for their family, and it's a big tension in their home. But I'm talking about the average home. People are good-willed people. They're really trying to make their relationship work, and there's these bumps that come along the way, and they don't understand what's going on with the husband and what's going on with the wife, and they get misunderstandings in their communication, and that's why we're trying to do this series, is to help decode this communication problem. But see, a man is thinking this way. He's thinking, wow, if I can provide for my wife, wow, for instance, if I go buy my wife a brand new BMW, his male point system says, wow, I just scored 50,000 points. But the truth is, if his wife is having a bad day, and the husband comes home and he just puts his arm around her and says, honey, you make me happy. You're the only woman for me. I want to know I support you and I love you. Wow, he just scored 5 million points. And as a wife, you enjoy that. See, wives, like all of us, want and need affirmation. How meaningful is it to the wife when it comes from the very man she loves? See, we all thrive on it. Wives thrive on affirmation from their husbands. It energizes and it motivates them. And men are the same way. Men need affirmation from you, ladies. And you want to know how you can score 5 million points with your husband? You need to know one of the little secrets of the decoding the language of communication, speaking that language of respect with the man. Okay, I'll tell you what it is, ladies. It's very simple. Now, it's called a respect note. A respect note is kind of like, well, just put it this way. Let's say that your husband, not even on your anniversary, not even on your birthday, your husband goes out and gets you a nice little card, and he writes in there, honey, he calls you by whatever little nickname he has for you, and he says, I just want to know I love you and you mean more than anything to me than anybody else in this world. And he gives that to you. How do you feel? I mean, you would take that note and you would read it and you would put it someplace in a drawer and keep it forever, right? I mean, that was 5 million points for you. A man needs that same thing, and I would like to refer to it as a respect note. Do this. Just test this and see what happens. Go out and get a card for your husband. And don't get something that's funny or something. Get a card, and then write in that card some little nickname that you call your husband, not hey Bubba or something like that, but some little special name for him. And then write on there, honey, I just want to let you know that I admire you and I respect you. And list a couple things that you respect about your husband, and then put that card someplace where he'll find it. There was one lady that did this with her husband, and she walked by his study, and as she walked by his study, she glanced in there and he was reading the card. Later that day, she walked by the study and she looked in there and he was reading that card, and I wonder how many times he was reading the card that she didn't know about you. He read the card and he has, there's this, all of a sudden, this glow of admiration that starts coming back. Men, like women, thrive on affirmation. It energizes and it motivates us. Look at this Bible verse. It's in Proverbs 31, 27 through 30. It said, "She looketh well to the ways of her household, and eateth not the bread of idleness." This is saying that she looketh well. She has wisdom, that she knows how to look over and to preserve and to uplift her household. She looketh well to the ways of her household, and eateth not the bread of idleness. Her children arise up and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praiseth her. Many daughters have done virtuously, but thou excellest them all. Favor is deceitful, and beauty is vain, but a woman that feareth the Lord, she shall be praised. How is a woman praised? By the way that she upholds the household. And her husband, knows that she admires and respects him, and she's there behind him, encouraging him. See, likewise, men thrive on female affirmation, just like you thrive on male affirmation. Rather than telling your husband how to do something when he's messing up, or how stupid he is if he can't figure out how to do something, you need to cheer your husband on. You need to encourage your husband. It's true. It's absolutely true that behind every great man there's a great woman. Great men have achieved great things because their wives simply showed confidence in their abilities and told them that they could do it. I love this Bible verse in Genesis 2:18. It says, "And the Lord God said, It is not good that man should be alone. I will make a helpmeet for him." Or in other words, I will make for him a helper as a counterpart. And what this Bible verse is really saying is that God has made female to be a counterpart, not to be in a situation where a man is over a woman or a woman is over a man, but to be a counterpart, that the two can become one flesh, that the union of the man and the woman can be one together, and that wife can be a helpmeet, not to tear him down, but to lift him up. And in doing that, you need to learn to speak his mother tongue, which is the language of respect, to bring back that glow in your relationship. Proverbs 31, 11 and 12 says, "The heart of her husband doth safely trust in her, so that he shall have no need of spoil. She will do him good and not evil all the days of her life." Wow, what a powerful Bible verse. It says that the heart of the husband does safely trust in her. Why? Because he has confidence in her, because she's proven herself. He knows that there's loyalty there, there's admiration there, that she's behind him. And when a man has a wife behind him solidly, that builds safety in that relationship. And a lot of men, they don't trust their wives. They know that their wives hold secrets, that their wives talk with other ladies, that they do things behind the husband's back, and it destroys confidence and trust. But Proverbs 31 lady, if I can say it that way, has the heart of her husband. She's won the heart of her husband. Proverbs 31:26 goes on, it says, "She openeth her mouth with wisdom, and her tongue is the law of kindness." Ladies, I'd just like to share with you that in learning the mother tongue of men, you need to show respect in your husband's judgment. Maybe he messes up, maybe he's made some mistakes, but a man needs your respect. He needs to have you respect his judgment. See, a man deeply needs the woman in his life to respect his knowledge, his opinions, and his decisions. In other words, his judgment. And a lot of men just feel like they don't have that. Many men express that they feel like their opinions and decisions are valued in every area of their life except for in their homes. Can you imagine? Look at these statistics. This is a survey done between men of the ages 36 to 55, and they were asked this question. In your home life, do you have the thoughts like, "I'm not appreciated around here"? Now, these statistics are pretty amazing. 52% of the men said yes frequently or sometimes. That means over half of the men that did this survey, out of hundreds of men, they were saying that in their home, they felt like they were not appreciated. 25% of the men went on to say, "No, rarely I have thoughts like that." In other words, it still happens once in a while, but not very often. And only 23% of the men said, "No, I generally feel appreciated in my home." Now, this speaks to us a lot. This is telling us that men generally in their homes feel like they're not respected by maybe the children or by the wife. And God has given us the helpmeet to be there, to be a support, to be a foundation. I've explained to my wife over and over again that, this ministry is not about Jeff Rich. this ministry is really about my wife, because she's the one really behind the scenes a lot of times that's making everything happen. I've told her, I told her, Christy, I said, honey, I said, your position in this ministry is more important than any other position, because you're the one that's the backbone for this ministry. You give me and empower me, you give me the power and empower me to be able to do the things that this ministry is doing. And I said, without your support, it just wouldn't happen. And you stop and think for a second about good leaders, for instance. Now, in the male arena, I just want to share with you ladies something. In the male arena, whether it's the head of a fire department or the head of the police force or a commander in the military or a football coach, that good leaders never shame the spirit of a man. You know, there can be the worst situations, and the leader, who's a good leader, not a bad leader, but is a good leader, who understands how to speak the language of a man, can go to a situation, let's say a football team just lost a game, and he can go into the locker room with these guys, and they're all hanging their heads, you know, they just lost this football game, and he can say, you guys played rotten out there, you didn't put any effort into it, why did you make those moves? But I know each one of you personally, I know each one of you are capable of doing better than this. Put your head up, I'm talking to you. Look at me in the eye here. I know each one of you, and I know the potential down inside of you. You know, I know you can perform better than this. And a man can talk like a man like that, and he can draw out of them the respect and encourage them and motivate them to success, that they will reach that potential because he's lifting up their potential. He will never, ever, a good leader will never, ever shame the spirit of a man. He might get after them about a bad performance, but he will not shame their spirit. Instead, he will lift them up and speak a language that they will be able to understand. Women hold an incredible power in the way they communicate with men and their sons to build them up or tear them down. I've been in a lot of different homes, traveling, speaking at churches over the years, and sometimes I've been shocked at how I've seen how a wife will talk to her husband or the children, you know, and say things in a negative way or focus on negativity or point out faults and errors. And we have to, each of us need to cultivate, as men and women in our marriage and raising our kids, need to cultivate a tendency towards focusing in on the positive and not the negative. We need to always try to build up and not tear down in our relationships with each other. It says in Proverbs 12, verse 4, a virtuous woman is a crown to her husband, but she that maketh ashamed is rottenness in his bones. A virtuous woman is like a crown to her husband. It's such a beautiful Bible text. Which brings me to a more sensitive point. Now I'm going to go from, as the old Southern preacher said, I'm going to go from preaching to meddling. You know, how about the times where you have a group of people over at your house and you say jokes at the expense of your husband in front of other people? Has that ever happened? A large number of men, when surveyed, stated this one statement: when my wife says something disrespectful, I think, I can't believe she doesn't know how that makes me feel. Ellen White, in the book called Adventist Home, which is a really wonderful book on having a solid Christian home, Ellen White points out this one very important point about this. She said, never should either party indulge in a joke at the expense of the other's feelings. Never should either the husband or the wife in sport or in any other manner complain of each other to others. Wow. It goes on, for frequently indulging in this foolish and what may seem perfectly harmless joking will end in trial with each other and perhaps estrangement, or in other words, possibly divorce. I have been shown that there should be a sacred shield around every family. Adventist Home, page 177. You know, have you ever thought about what happens sometimes when a group of girls get together and they talk disrespectfully about their husbands when they're alone together? You know, it's common that between men and women, when they get around their friends, to start complaining about their spouses. And I want to share with you that that is a real evil that you need to consider that needs to stop. Men need to stop it. Women need to stop it. Because, for instance, if a wife does this, and she's going to her friends and she's looking at all the little faults of her husband, and she's relaying these faults over and over again to her friends, what she's doing is she's deeply embedding in her thinking about how terrible he really is. And the end result is more and more disaffection and possibly even divorce. In the book Adventist Home, it goes on to say, there's a sacred circle around every family which should be preserved. No other one has the right in that sacred circle. The husband and the wife should be all to each other. The wife should never have no secrets to keep from her husband and let others know. And the husband should have no secrets to keep from his wife to relate to others. The heart of his wife should be the grave for the faults of the husband, and the heart of the husband should be the grave of the wife's faults. Adventist Homes, page 177. Now, I want to just share with you that there are times where the rule is broken on this. If in a home, and I've been involved with counseling different married couples and seen some horrendous things, but in a home, if there's physical abuse or sexual abuse, child abuse, that's when the sacred circle needs to be broken. That's when you need to venture out. If your husband's being abusive, the husband is sexually molesting the children, there's things like that happening, then that sacred circle needs to step out. I've seen some families where the husband runs the family like a dictator, and there is oppression there, and there's physical and even mental abuse that goes on. Sometimes the wife needs to reach out to a professional person to try to find help in that situation. So we want to make sure that we don't use this quotation from Adventist Home in the wrong way, and we need to understand the proper way in which it should be applied. One married man talking about how sensitive a male ego is, or the male ego, he put it this way. He said, the male ego is the most fragile thing on the planet. Women have got this idea that they've got such a huge ego that I need to take him down a peg. No way. The male ego is incredibly fragile. So the counsel here is, ladies, seek to build up, not to tear down. Just as a woman loves to hear the words, I love you, a man's heart is deeply touched by the simple words, I'm so proud of you. In learning to speak the mother language of men, you need to show respect in your assumptions. It's amazing to me when they were doing research what they found out, that many women find that when they honestly evaluate their communication with their husbands, that they often assume something bad about the man they love. There's something inherent to human nature that tends towards the negative. I don't know how many times I've caught myself when I'm talking about somebody, I say, well, I know so-and-so, he's a really nice person, but, and then after the but, something negative comes. And it's so easy to be focused on all these little defects of character that your husband has, that is the thing that you focus on. And we need to learn to focus on the positive side of things. Don't focus on all the weaknesses of your husband. Focus on the strengths of your husband. Give him affirmation and encourage him. And as I talk with the men, I'm going to tell them the same thing. They need to do that with you as wives. Have you ever heard of the wife that is constantly reminding her husband? Now, some guys maybe are forgetful. Maybe some guys are getting older and they need their wife there to tell them how to do stuff. But there's some wives that are constantly reminding their husbands over and over again. And in that, a man basically is hearing, I don't trust you. Honestly, this is one of the things that kind of drives me crazy because, I'm a performance-oriented guy. I always have this to-do list that I'm working on. I kind of am an achiever-type personality. And if my wife comes to me and 3 or 4 times repeats to me, don't forget to do that, don't forget to do that, don't forget to do that, I feel really that it's not an issue about doing that. I feel like it's an issue that she doesn't trust me, that I don't measure up, that I'm not adequate enough. And that's kind of subliminally what men are getting in their minds when they hear these kind of things over and over. And you stop and think about it, when you're giving reminders continually over and over about things, there's another word for that, and that's called, this is the place, by the way, where angels fear to tread, where I'm going right now, but this is called nagging. And nagging, if continued, becomes scolding. And nagging and scolding is talked about in the scriptures very straightforward. In fact, if you turn to Proverbs 19, verse 13, it says, the contentions of a wife are a continual dropping. This Bible verse is saying that the contentions, or the nagging of a wife, or the contention spirit of a wife, are a continual dropping, like water dropping off of a roof when it's raining. Now, there's something that they've done in some countries. They take a man and they tie him up and they drip water on his forehead. And then eventually, after hour of having this continual dropping of water on his forehead, he'll go insane. And they call this torture. So we could actually paraphrase this Bible verse to say, the continual nagging of a wife is like torture. And Proverbs 21 verse 9 goes on to say, it's better to live in the corner of the housetop than in a house shared with a contentious woman. Like I shared earlier in some of the presentations, every side that God has made in a man and a woman is good, as far as, the certain sides that he's put in a woman and certain sides he's put in a man, but those sides that we have backsided weaknesses that oftentimes can be negative. For instance, he's built one side in a woman, it's called the mothering side. And that mothering side could be turned around into a backsided weakness where, quote, the mothering comes out and she ends up nagging her husband. And when you treat your husband as one of the children, you know what? It's condescending to him. And men feel put down. I remember one time I was in a car And my friend was talking with me, and he got distracted because guys are compartmentalized, and so he's focused on his conversation. He missed the turnoff on the freeway. And she, in the back seat, his wife went ballistic, and she said, "Why did you miss the turnoff? It was right there. Now we have to go all the way up there and turn around. Oh, turn here, turn here, turn here. You missed the turn again. Why didn't you turn there? Do you want me to drive?" And I was sitting in the front seat going, my, this friend of mine was actually taking it pretty good, but you know, she didn't realize what she was doing to her husband and how degrading it was to her husband. You know, how those kind of things take away that glow in the relationship. You know, and when that happens, it does one of two things. It either causes a man to get angry or to shut down. Now, I thought that these statistics were pretty amazing. Now, this is from the book For Men Only, and it's basically helping men to understand about how a woman reacts in time of a conflict. 85% of women, when they're in the middle of a conflict, what they will do is they will move towards the person they're having the conflict with to talk. 85% of the women will do that. Well, do you know what men do? Well, in the middle of a conflict, 85% of the men will shut down or simply walk away. Now stop and think about that for a second. That's basically saying 85% of the females move towards each other to talk. 85% of the men shut down and walk away. Why is that? I'll tell you why. I'll let you enter into the man's world for a second. In the male arena, whether it's animals or whether it's humans, in the male arena, if there are two males that are angry and there's a confrontation taking place and the two males come face to face, that means that it's the next step to getting physical. And you see two men that are angry and they're raising their voice and they're having a confrontation or a conflict. The next thing will happen is they'll come face to face, and then the next thing is pushing and shoving, and then finally a fight. And so a man, in order to preserve his honor, if he's an honorable man, when he's being confronted with this coming face to face with a wife who has, you know, some kind of issue she's trying to resolve, a man will try to do the honorable thing and simply shut down and walk away. See, God has hardwired a woman to mother, but these, like I was saying, these strengths can become backsided weaknesses. So here's a little advice to entering into a man's world to learn how to decode these communication issues between us. When you have something that you need that is an area of contention, or there's a problem in your marriage and you need to talk to your husband about it, don't move towards him and don't persist in an argument. And you know, I'm going to also be sharing in the next couple sessions about the venting that a woman needs to have in order to close pop-up windows, and that's a whole nother subject. But wives, when you have a point you need to make to your husband, just simply make your point. Remember what men want? They want direct communication as much as possible. So make your point and then back off and give him time to process. Maybe he'll say, "What do you mean by that?" Just make your point and say, "Honey, I just want you to think about it, okay?" Say it in a nice way, approach him in a kind way. Don't try to be emotionally all upset about it. Come to him and just present your point and then let a man process it, because as I was sharing, men compartmentalize. You give them the data. You know, men communicate for the sharing of information. You give them the data and you just let it alone and don't work it up into a big fight and let him process it. It'll go 100 times farther than if you get into a bantering back and forth. I had a lady come up to me at some meetings, at a camp meeting where I was sharing some of this stuff, and she came up to me and she said, "Jeff, I need to talk to you, Jeff. Jeff, I need to talk to you. My husband is not spending any more time with me, and I don't know what's going on in our relationship. You see, Jeff, I've tried to talk with him about it, and I want him to open up to me and tell me what the problem is, and I've asked him if he'd like to go to counseling, but he doesn't want to go to counseling. And about a year ago, it was a whole lot better when we were a lot closer then, and he was even coming to church with me at that time, Jeff." And I'm going around picking my Bible up after the meetings. I'm talking, and she's following me, and she's like right in my personal space. And she said, Jeff, I don't know what's going to happen, because I simply want to have a closer relationship with my husband. I'd like to talk these things out. And after about 20 minutes, I thought to myself, I think I see what the problem is here. The contentious wife, the wife who is nagging in that way, even in a good-willed way, trying to preserve her and build respect in her marriage, is approaching it the wrong way. You need to learn to evaluate yourself and need to give men space to process. And you need to make your main point and back off and allow him to think. Also learning to speak the male language of respect. There's something that needs to be done in your assumption area, and that's the next point. Let's say that you're doing something and he's choosing not to help. Don't assume that he's doing that deliberately. There's nothing wrong with simply coming to your husband and asking him to help you if he's oblivious to the fact that you need help with something. See, men like direct communication if it's done in the right way. It reminds me of a story of a newly married couple. You know, the husband was 22 years old, the wife was 21. They've only been married for like 6-7 months. And he invites some of his friends over for dinner. And she makes a really nice dinner. And they all sit around the table and they're talking and laughing. And then after the dinner, the 3 guys get up and they go in the other room and they get on the internet. They're looking at cars, you know. And the wife's cleaning up the kitchen. And after about 45 minutes, you know, the 2 guys leave and the guy is in there and he's looking at the computer. And the wife is clanging dishes around and putting stuff away in the kitchen. And then all of a sudden, boom, he gets hit in the side of the head with a tennis shoe. And he looks at her and goes, "What'd you do that for?" And she says, "Why are you leaving me in here? Why are you leaving me here in the kitchen to clean up all this mess?" And he goes, "Why didn't you ask me to help you? I would have helped you." "Well, you should have saw what was going on." And they get into this thing back and forth. And the question is, who's right? Who's wrong? And you know what the answer is? The answer is yes. That's the answer. Because they were both right. They were both wrong. And so here's a 2 good-willed couple, newly married, and all of a sudden there's a tennis shoe in the forehead, and the wife was upset because the husband's not in tune with what's going on in the kitchen. And the thing is, we both know that the other started it. They both are justified in being angry. See, men like direct communication. And being compartmentalized in their thinking, sometimes they're just not aware of what's happening around them. They're sitting there at the computer focusing on cars. They're oblivious to you being in the kitchen, cleaning up, you know, the kitchen. And ladies, have you ever heard a guy say to you, or your husband say to you, "Hey, look, I'm not a mind reader. You have to tell me what's going on"? That's because men process things different than women. And it starts this crazy cycle. And I like to do a review of the crazy cycle. I know I've shared this in some of the other presentations, but what ends up happening is a man sometimes will be perceived as not showing love to his wife, so she reacts. And when she reacts disrespectfully, without respect. And so that causes the cycle to start spinning. And then when she reacts without respect, it causes him to react. And so he reacts and he ends up reacting by not showing love. And this crazy cycle starts spinning without respect, without love, reaction and reaction and reaction over and over, and it spins out of control until finally the 2 end up in a divorce court. Like this young couple. You know, they both knew the other one started. They both were justified. And where does the crazy cycle end up today? Like I just said, 50% of people in the church today, Christians today in the Christian church, are ending up in divorce courts. This is what Malachi says in the Old Testament, chapter 2, verse 16. It says, "So take heed to yourselves, and let none be faithless to the wife of his youth. For I hate divorce, saith the Lord, God of Israel." Malachi 2:16. So who's going to step up and start breaking this crazy cycle? You know who's going to do it? It's going to be the one who's the most spiritual. The one who's the most mature. Somebody has to step up to stop this crazy cycle. Brick by brick, these offenses that have taken place in a marriage relationship need to be broken down. A wife can start this whole process by energizing her husband, by learning more how to speak the Slavic language, the German language, and be able to interface with her husband in a way that can bring back that glow in your husband. Husbands want from their wives is shoulder-to-shoulder time. Men want shoulder-to-shoulder time. Women want face-to-face time. You know, women love it when, you know, you can sit at a quiet restaurant and you can talk face-to-face, and they like that intimacy and such. You know, there's something that energizes a man. Like I talked about in the church, where the wife was just looking up at her husband and look of admiration. He's sitting there kind of acting like he doesn't notice, but he's just getting energized from the glow coming from her because she's admiring him, and he knows it, and he's just soaking it up. Husbands like it when their wives are side by side. Like I have a hobby. I work around with guitars, and I like the different kinds of wooden things. And when my wife comes out and she said, "Wow, that's a beautiful guitar. What kind of wood is that?" And she's taking an interest in my hobby. It just energizes me, you know, to have a spouse there that's taking an interest in the things that you're doing. Just being there. When I was dating, my wife used to come over and I'd tear a motor out of a car and she'd be scraping the grease off the motor with me, and she'd be just spending time there, just being with me, handing me tools, you know, and that's really energizes a guy, just to have his wife or his girlfriend there just watching him do whatever he's doing, you know, and spending time with him that way, shoulder to shoulder, you know, and there's sport activities, they're hiking and different things that maybe the guy likes to do, and a guy needs to reciprocate and do the things that she likes to do too. But the one thing that he doesn't like, if she comes along and then starts telling him how to do everything better. You know, my wife comes out and says, you know, look at that nick on that body. Is that supposed to be there on this guitar? Is the string set up too high? You know, that would really bother me. But if she comes out and takes an interest in what I'm doing, then that just speaks, it just energizes me. And you know, it just reminds me of the story of a guy who was working on his car. And he'd be working on his car day after day, and this guy would walk by and he'd notice his wife was just always kind of just sitting out there while he's working on his car. And his husband would just kind of like look out from underneath the car every once in a while and look at his wife, and he'd just be kind of energized by the fact that she was there. She didn't even have to talk to him. Just being there, just watching him work on his car was energizing to him. And the guy came by next couple of days later, and he saw the guy, and he looked under the car, and there was not even a jack holding the car up. He was holding the car up with his chest. It's just energized. It's just a joke. Anyhow, he was energized by his wife's presence. You know, see, men love the companionship of their wives when that glow is there, especially if they know their wife loves and respects them. Men want their wives to cheer them on, not to criticize them. Your husband wants to reach his potential in Christ. Look at what it says in Ephesians chapter 5 again. And we've been going over this through the series, this Ephesians chapter 5, the marriage theme over and over, the motif of the marriage relationship. 25 through 33, it says, "Nevertheless, let every one of you in particular so love his wife, even as himself. And the wife see that she reverence or respect her husband." A divine command by God saying, look at ladies, this is the key to being able to unlock your husband's love, to win him even to the Lord, as it says in 1 Peter. Now look, your husband maybe has an unspoken desire. And this desire I'm going to share with you right now. Maybe your husband would have a hard time verbalizing this. Maybe your husband would have a difficult time even writing this out or trying to express it. So I'm going to try to do it for him. But I know down in the heart of a good-willed man, a man that loves his family and loves his wife and wants to make things work, maybe there's some hurt there. Down inside, he might be thinking this. Listen to these beautiful words. Dream with me. Be supportive of my goals in life. Get excited about my ventures. Tell me that you see my personal competencies, or at least my potential. Praise me for my diligence in working, and notice my successful results. I am trying to cultivate the garden God has given me. I've got my turf, and I'm trying to make something out of it. My performance matters to me, but I want it the most to matter to you. I have been told that every man does what he does for the admiration of one woman, and you are that woman. I'm sensitive to even the suggestion that I'm a failure in your eyes. Do not compare me to other men who do better than me. Help me with balancing the different parts of my life. Don't criticize me. Do not make me second to the kids. Be my teammate. Work together with me. Let me know you're honored to be my helper, given to me by God. The next session will be called Understanding the Mind of a Woman.